What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of Spotlight with Shadow. I am Shadow, the bearded bastard himself. Today, however you're seeing this, listening to it, my guest does not need an introduction, but I will introduce him. He is somebody that I use as a mentor when it comes to this, and somebody I've grown quite a great fond friendship with now. He is a chef by choice, chef by trade, marked by choice. He is the Will Gray. What is going on, buddy?
Shadow, it's really good to see you. I'm gonna be honest. This is a little bit weird for me. I'm seldom in this seat. I'm usually the host, or I'm usually the guy doing the interview. And now I'm sitting here, and I'm like Ricky Bobby in Talladega Nights, and I'm like, I don't know what to do with my hands.
Well, I mean, we could talk about what you've done with your hands in your life. So tell us, what got your passion for being a chef? Where did that come from?
To be completely honest, like my chefing career started in a very weird point in my life. I was in college and I was a music major. I was a music education major, to be even one step further. I wanted to be a high school band director. And I was getting really late into my college career. My girlfriend at the time, fiance, then first wife, she was pregnant, and I knew that I needed to kind of shit or get off the proverbial pot with my career path. I had been in college for a while. I was a career student. I majored in my fraternity. And so I went to my advisor and I told them I wanted to switch majors because I wanted to get something that could get me out of school quickly. I was far enough along. I didn't want to just be another college dropout and a statistic. So I ended up getting a journalism degree that meant nothing to me at the time. And I had a job as a sous chef. So when I took my first gig, I was a junior sous chef at a country club in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I was essentially a butcher's apprentice. I was a line cook. I was a prep cook, like pretty much whatever the chefs and other sous chefs ahead of me needed out of life. And for some reason, it stuck with me. When I say it stuck with me, it was like, if you've ever been good at something, like, you know it. And it's not like this isn't a natural God-given talent. It was something where I was like, I really like cooking. I could tell that I was good at it. And when I started devoting time and energy and respect into the art is when I realized, okay, this is a career. It wasn't just a job. And that's why when I switched majors, I knew I had a career in culinary arts. And that's when I took off with it. I was young. I was 21 when I took off as a sous chef. I was 24 when I took my first executive chef job. So I had been cooking professionally, I say since 18, but I took my first cooking job as a dishwasher at a little mom and pop pizza place at 15 years old when I was in high school. So I've literally been cooking longer and working in kitchens longer of my life than not.
That's insane. I mean, we've had these conversations. I've learned a little bit about where your background and stuff. So you're born and raised Tennessee.
Correct. Yeah, I was right here in Nashville. I'm actually from a little bit north of town. I don't tell people I'm from Gallatin because when I tell people I'm from Gallatin, Tennessee, people are like, what the fuck does that mean? And I'm like, Nashville. I'm from Nashville. You know, Dolly Parton is my mom. Johnny Cash is my dad. I bleed fucking Jack Daniels. I'm from Nashville. But I'm not. I'm actually from Gallatin, Tennessee, which is about 35 minutes north of the city. At this point, it's a glorified suburb of Nashville, though.
I mean, that happens over time, right? I mean, I grew up in Toronto, and where I was born was its own city when I was born, but now it's a part of the greater Toronto area. Going through your chefing work and stuff like that, and your passion for professional wrestling seem to have almost blended together now. Where would you say that in the world of professional wrestling, where would you rank yourself as a chef?
Where would I rank?
Yeah, so when I say that, would you be like a heavyweight champion, a mid-carder, a jobber? Like, what do you think, in your honest opinion, where you would be with that?
At my peak, a little bit of a story and a little bit of background. So when I say at my peak, the 2016, 2017, 2018 range, I was at my peak. I was cooking at Augusta National for the Masters golf course. I did 2 tournaments in 2016, 2017. I got featured at the 2016 and 2017 Taste of Music City festivals, the 2017 Music City Food and Wine Fest. I got to cook at the James Beard House as a part of a kind of a celebration of chefs under 35 at one point. That was kind of the top 50 under 35 or some shit like that. And they brought us up there in like little groups to cook. It was like this. So like, I would say at my peak, I would say I was the X Division champion for TNA, and I lost in the main event of Slammiversary.
Okay, I'm just using that as a reference to kind of blend your two loves together there. So I thought
I
I'd throw it.
honestly get it. I had a dance at the show. You know what I mean? Like I had a dance at the show. COVID fucked me over. As something else, big fucked me over, but I'm sure we'll probably get to that.
Yeah. So I gotta ask, being a chef, being in the Nashville area, who is that you're at least know of the biggest name you've cooked for to this day?
The biggest name that I've cooked for personally, as in like a celebrity or like another chef?
It doesn't matter if it's a chef, a celebrity, just somebody that I guess a celebrity, whether it be a chef or just a big name person that you at least know of that you've cooked for.
Probably my favorite story to tell everybody is I was a chef at a hotel here in the city, and the Wu-Tang Clan were here.
Oh shit.
They stayed at the hotel, and the Wu-Tang Clan, just to put it in perspective for those of you not hip-hop fans, this is like a group of like 15 dudes, and that's who they go on stage with. That's the active members of the Wu-Tang Clan. You know what I mean? That's not counting roadies. That's not counting producers and DJs and travel managers and all this shit. So they rented an entire floor of suites in our hotel. Okay. And not only did they rent the entire floor of suites in the hotel, they went ahead and paid all of the cleaning fees for all of those rooms because, you know, it was 2000s, 2010-ish, 11. So like they were non-smoking rooms at this point. So they went ahead and bought the whole floor. They paid all the cleaning fees for every single room. So we kind of knew what we were getting into. Some of the coolest dudes, though, on the planet. They would call down regularly every hour or so to get room service, to get bottle service, to get stuff taken up to the floor. And they were partying constantly. But every time we would go up there, they would tip us well. They would make sure we had what we needed and taken care of. They were making sure nobody was hassling us. Like some of the most genuinely just cool ass dudes I ever had a chance to meet. And that was when they stayed at the hotel.
That is actually dope as hell. I mean, I don't think I've heard that story before. So that is really cool.
It was a lot of fun. It was around the time they played at Bonnaroo. I want to say it was 2010. I'm 99% sure it was 2010 was the year that they were here.
Okay. So we're talking a little bit about your teenage to adult years. And if you're comfortable with this, I'd like to ask, what was Little Will like? Like, what was your upbringing like growing up there?
The easiest way to put this, I was in a situation where my mother did everything she could. My mom did her absolute best, but I was the product of a broken home, meaning my mom and dad divorced when I was young. My mom had a few other husbands. I had stepdads, but I never really had a father figure, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Once my mom and my dad divorced, like there was nobody else that really came into that. So for me as a young kid, I've always been naturally introverted. And I've always said, even now in my late 30s, I'm an introvert who plays an extrovert on TV. I don't like large groups. I don't like large crowds. I don't like any of those. When I was young, I was a nerd. Let's just call a fucking spade, Shadow. I was nerdy as shit, big, thick ass glasses, like the whole nine. I was in speech therapy till I was in the 7th grade, 8th grade, like the whole nine, dude. It was like, it was rough. So naturally, I was made fun of a lot. I was a little nerdy, speech impediment. I was a white dude in a predominantly not white area. I think I'll say that. That's a good PC way to put it. You know what I mean?
Fair, yeah.
So I was ridiculed at a young age, and I learned to stick up for myself because of that. So I was raised in I call it now, I say it's like little Dicky syndrome. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
was raised in a not a great environment, but it wasn't bad in a sense that my mom put me in it. She did everything, again, she did everything she could for me and my sisters, but it was the natural event of being raised by a single mom. You know what I mean? So I aged out early. I matured early. Probably by 17, I had pretty much moved out of my mom's house. My senior year of high school, I was essentially renting the spare bedroom from my girlfriend's parents at the time because they were right around the corner from my high school. So I would stay there, go to school, go to work, go back to their place and go to sleep and do that rotation over again, plus band rehearsals and shit like that. I was an adult by the time I was 16 years old. I paid my way through college myself. My parents didn't pay for it. My first house was signed on by me. I bought my first house by myself. I sold my first house by myself. Like, there was a whole period of my life where it was a whole lot of just having to take care of myself because that was the only option because there wasn't anybody else to do it.
No, I completely get that. Similar situation, but that's not about me. It's about you. Yeah, I mean, I guess that plays a huge part in what we see today on screen, and it makes you you. And I'm grateful that you had that. As weird as that probably sounds, I'm grateful you had that chance to be brought like that, because then I don't know what kind of will we'd have now. Right? Like just by listening to that.
No, I can definitely agree with that. Yeah.
So I know that you're huge into wrestling, and I mean huge into wrestling. Was that something you clung to growing up, or is that something that you developed later on in life? Like where does that love of pro wrestling in general just come from?
I was brought up around it from a very young age. My dad's mom in the early 90s watched wrestling. And when I say that, I mean like early Saturday mornings, like wrestling. WCW before Turner buyout wrestling, late 80s stuff. I started watching regularly in probably 92, 93. We were watching a lot of WCW stuff because we were right here. At that point, I was living in a little town called Savannah, Tennessee, right at the Alabama and Mississippi border, right where they snap together and Tennessee sits on top of it and they form a T where Alabama and Mississippi all come together in Tennessee. That's where I was living at the time. So it was an equal distance from Alabama as it was to Mississippi from where I was at. So it was deep south. That being said, the heart of Turner territory, right? Mm-hmm. So like WCW was in that boiling pot for us. So I watched a lot of that growing up. And then I've likened this to a few other stories. I was just talking to Dad had about this. When my mom and my dad separated in the mid 90s, it was very much that single dad syndrome. He would like pick us up and we would go to a wrestling show, or he would pick us up and we'd go to a Nashville Sounds game, you know? So it was like, he always had those one-off activities on his weekends. And early on it was USWA and Continental Wrestling. Then by the early 2000s, it was TNA when they started running in the Asylum and stuff. So it was kind of always there. Always an avid watcher, always an avid fan. I would say, started to smarten up to the business way too young. We were backyard wrestling by 14 and in ninth grade. There's still some videos circulating on YouTube of me wrestling in a luchador mask and stuff. We started training. The handful of us that started doing it seriously, we started training at 15 and 16 years old. We were sophomores and juniors in high school. We were training ring time and training time for setting up the ring, selling concessions, taking tickets. And I'm talking like shindies, bro. Like little VFW indie shows. You know what I mean? Like fucking not even high school gyms. We're talking folding chairs, no guardrails, like shindies. But it got us in the ring. It taught us how to take bumps. It taught us how to do it. So we did this on and off for the last 2.5 or 3 years of high school. So I was always a fan, always in it. Then I started wrestling. And then when I graduated high school, to be completely honest, 18-year-old Will didn't give a shit about taking bumps that weren't in a ring. I was taking other bumps by that point.
Fair enough.
And I was worried about women and drugs.
I mean, I feel that considering hockey player and stuff like that, so I can feel you there. Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, I did the same kind of thing with like you as backyard wrestling. It just seemed to draw everybody in, right? Like that was, and I'm going to say what I'm going to say here, but Juggalos kind of made backyard wrestling what it is. I don't know. For me, that the Juggalos, man, were inspirational in that sense.
I would say yes and no. Actually surprised. I did not expect you to bring up ICP. That's applaud you there, my friend. I think what ICP does really well for independent wrestling, and not only that, the backyard culture is Juggalo Championship Wrestling has always been very open door. You don't have to have a pedigree. You don't have to have been trained by fucking Gorilla Monsoon, and you don't have to have worked for 12 other promotions, or how many TV matches, or how much time do you have worked. They don't give a shit. If you're passionate and you've got a little bit of tape and they can see you're not going to fucking kill somebody, like Juggalo Championship Wrestling is genuinely one of those wrestling promotions where they will almost give anybody a fucking shot. Mm-hmm. And again, this is coming from somebody who was just telling you I trained at Shindy's in a fucking VFW hall at 15 years old. Like, I'm one step away from a fucking Unsolved Mysteries TV show. You know what I mean? Like, but like
First 48 featuring Will.
Yeah, dude. Like, what the fuck was my mom thinking? You know? But you think about Juggalo Championship Wrestling, like they give a lot of these guys chances who don't get on the indies because they don't get on the indies because they came from a backyard or because they've only ever done death matches or because. That's how what I think Juggalo Championship Wrestling does for wrestling really well. And if it wasn't for Juggalo Championship Wrestling, GCW wouldn't be doing the backyard wrestling event they do every year now. They just did Backyard Wrestling 7. And if it wasn't for JCW and Juggalo Championship Wrestling, GCW wouldn't be doing Backyard Fest every year.
I think if Juggalo Championship Wrestling doesn't happen, we don't get guys like Gage and stuff like that. Well, you might because of ECW, because of their age, but I mean, Juggalo's played a huge, whether you want to admit it or not, they played a big part in.
I would say yes and no. XPW played a huge. Oh yeah. What Juggalo Championship Wrestling played a bigger role in was that underground, like that underground feel for deathmatch wrestling, because CCW and GCW and XPW became what ECW left. When ECW folded and they left the market, we were left with XPW and CZW and eventually GCW. What Juggalo Championship Wrestling was, they kept that underground feel. They've never felt like a big promotion because they've never wanted to be. And that's what I appreciate about them. And I'm not a Juggalo anymore. 39-year-old Will, definitely not a Juggalo. 19-year-old Will into my early 20s would have appreciated it.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah.
So before I go into my next statement, I will give a trigger warning because the subject is going to get deep and it's going to maybe trigger some of you. So the subject matter is cancer, and I plan to have a conversation with Will about this. So if this is a topic that triggers you, fast forward a few minutes. So Will, it's no secret. You battled cancer and you kicked its ass, and you're still here to tell the tale, which is honorable of you, and we love you, and we're glad you're here. What has that journey been like for you from the moment you found out to ringing that bell? I've got to know. Whatever you're comfortable saying, and whatever you're not, I'm not going to push the subject, but I'd like to hear your story.
So we'll start at the beginning of it. And with that comes the last week of March in 2020. All right, which is honestly about 15 months before my diagnosis. The last week of March, I got a text message from my dad, and me and my dad had a very father-son Southern relationship. We would text each other about once a week or so, twice a week, just to check in. We would talk on the phone about once every other week, and we would see each other for the big ones, holidays and birthdays and shit like that, right? Very traditional father-son relationship. He texted me out of the blue one day. He's like, Will, give me a call. So I was like, fuck, okay. So I called him. I was like, what's up, Dad? He's like, I'm sick. I'm going to the hospital. They're going to run some tests. Fast forward a week later, we just buried my dad. Like, that's how quickly it escalated. So from the last week of March to April 1st, like from a Tuesday to a Tuesday, like I found out that's how quickly we lost my dad. So I went into kind of a spiral. I had just went through the second ex Mrs. Will Gray, January of 2020 was when she and I divorced. My dad died in April of 2020. So I was, needless to say, like
circling the drain per se.
rock bottom.
Mhm.
Like I'm like right here. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yep.
it's a rough part in my life. And so I recovered and I did it, and I mourned and did things the best way I knew possible during a nationwide, worldwide pandemic. I packed up and moved across the state and moved 300 miles away from everybody that I knew, and got an apartment on the side of a mountain and opened a restaurant. And best and worst decision I've ever done in my life. When Nashville shut down because of COVID, it changed everything here. The restaurant industry absolutely took a shit. There were no jobs. There was no money to be made. And as a lifelong chef at that point, keeping in mind, again, I had been cooking for probably 10 years or so by 2020.
Mhm.
Like, it had been a while. So I didn't know what the fuck to do. Like, COVID happens. Fuck, I got to find something. I partner with a resort company that's opening a restaurant. They want a managing partner to come in, write the menu, run their programs, 3 restaurants, 2 little ones, a big one, and then a banquet program. So they had like a handful of people, interviewed us as a big group, broke us down, interviewed me, made me the job. I told my family the next day. I moved to Gatlinburg, Tennessee 2 days later. So like the whole thing, again, like my dad, Tuesday to Tuesday, when I interviewed for the job to when I moved was less than a week. Again. So it's just like, just flying by the seat of my pants, not giving a shit. I moved to Gatlinburg. Like I opened the restaurant. I'm going by 1,000 miles an hour. And then in April of 2021, around the first week, again, ironically, around the same time my dad passed, about a year later, I get the worst case of strep throat I've ever had in my life. Like absolute worst. I get some antibiotics. I take them. It gets better. It keeps coming back. They're like, yo, get rid of your toothbrushes, get rid of your hairbrushes, anything, like sanitize. So I get rid of them, wash all my bed sheets, new shampoo bottles, new toothbrushes, anything that could be like contaminated, get rid of it. I keep getting sick. I can't shake this. So this is the first week in April, then May, then June. So we get to the first week of June, and I still can't eat. I can't sleep. I'm barely able to drink water. Like, it's tough. I'm still sick. I'm like, when I say my throat hurts, like I've got open sores at this point. And it's like my body wouldn't heal. And then I start notice I've got these patchy bruises all over my body. And TMI, I had relations. And you could see the lady's palm print on my back. That's how easily I was bruising. So at that point, I'm like, something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Allison had just came to see me, and she left, and then I went the next morning to the doctor. I went in, got my blood test done, and he looked at me and he was like, good news is COVID is negative. You've got strep throat, but we can start your antibiotics. But he was like, you need to go to the hospital like right now. And I was like, why? And he was like, well, your white blood cell counts are so low that they didn't register on the test. And I was like, fuck. Okay. And he was like, your platelets are so low that they almost didn't register. And I was like, what does this mean? I'm not a doctor. And they were like, well, a normal person's platelets should be between 450 and 500. And I was like, what are mine? And they were like 4. And I was like, oh, so it's not that low then. And they were like, not 400, Will. Yours are at 4,004, like single digits, almost so low. My white blood cells and my platelets aren't even registering at this point. Then they tell me you're running on about 65% of your blood that you should have in your human body. And I was like, shit, what's happening? And they were like, we don't know where it's going. They were like, the bruising is a big part of it. But they were like, so you need to go to the hospital. I looked straight at this fucking Dr. Shadow on God. And I said, my apartment is 5 minutes down the road. And are you expecting me to have to stay the night? And he goes, you should pack for a couple days. I said, I'm going to go home, take a shower, pack a bag for 2 days, and smoke a blunt. And he goes, okay. He goes, go there and go straight to the hospital. Went home, took a shower, packed a bag, smoked a blunt, went to the hospital. I checked in. I'm Will Gray. This is the packet the clinic gave me. They immediately said, come with us. They took me to the back. No wait, nothing. Put me in a room, set me down, put 2 IVs in both arms, started drawing blood before a doctor even saw me. The first nurse comes in and she goes, look, this is the thing. It could be, they ran a list of things through. It was everything from, it could be cancer to it could be something as simple as foodborne hepatitis that'll give you on a 6-month regimen and then you'll be fine. She goes, there's a list of things, but you need to be prepared. We've got it narrowed down to this like handful of things. And right. I said, okay, cool. So I started Googling shit and I was like, it's not foodborne, hepatitis, because the restaurants I work on, we don't handle the foods. We don't like all of the shit that you would have to worry about. That's not something, my hygiene's not in question. Like my restaurants, so I started knocking shit off the list. The second guy came in, he had narrowed it down. He goes, we're pretty sure you have leukemia. He goes, we know you have, it's either leukemia or lymphoma. It's definitely a bloodborne cancer of some kind. And we're going to narrow it down. The doctor will be back in a little bit. I start Googling lymphoma, leukemia. What are the things? Blah, blah, blah. The doctor came in. He sat down. He gave me this look. And this is where it's like just the cold, hard truth. And it gives me the fucking goosebumps when I tell people this story, Shadow. He looked straight at me and he goes, Will, do you have somebody to call? And I said, yeah, I can call my mom. I can call my sister. And you know me. Exactly how I'm sitting here talking to you now was how I'm talking to this fucking doctor. And I'm like, yeah, I can call my mom. I can call my sister. Like, why? What's up? And he goes, I don't think you understand what's happening. He goes, you right now, if you were to get a paper cut, you could bleed out. If you were to be in a car crash, you would immediately die. He was like, you don't have enough fluids in your body to function at a normal speed. If you were to have a concussion, it would kill you. And I was like, oh. He was like, you shouldn't have been working. You shouldn't have been driving a car. He was like, he gave me the spill. You have a really rare form of bloodborne leukemia that originates in my bone marrow. It's called APL. Long story short of it. Okay. Mm-hmm. What are the options? 2. You have 2 options. You start chemo immediately, or we turn it down and thanks, doc, but no thanks, and then you go on your way. Okay, so if I say no, what happens? He literally looked me in the face. He was like, 45 to 60 days. Like, they don't do stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, like that kind of shit with my specific type of leukemia, because for the longest time, they didn't know what it was. Right. People just died from it, and then you would just be given, I would have died, and they would have just been like complications from COVID and strep throat. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I got this diagnosis, and they were like, okay. I was like, fuck it. Chemo, let's rock it. They were like, we're going to have to do a biopsy. We're going to do a round of radiation. We'll start chemo, like all after the biopsy, right? Mm-hmm. Primo. Next morning, I wake up. My mom, my sister are there. Biopsy. APL, start chemo. This is one of my favorite parts about this story, Shadow. All right. I have to tell Allison that I'm sick. Okay. Keeping in mind mine and Allison's relationship. I won't pull the curtain all the way back. Like, it's ebbs and ebbs and flows, but she's been in my life for 20 years now. And this is probably the worst thing I've ever done, but it's hilarious now because of how it worked out. Because I text her Mind you, she had seen me like 36 hours before. And I was like, hey, I need to tell you something, but I don't need you to worry about it. She was like, okay, what? And I said, I have cancer, but I'm going to be okay. So don't worry. Via a text, Shadow.
That's a whole lot of shit to drop on someone in a text, man. But that's such a Will Gray thing to do.
It's a very Will Gray thing to do. So I'll speed this story up. Essentially, after I got diagnosed, I had to retire from cooking. So I had moved out to Gatlinburg. I had opened the restaurants. I was running 3 places in the banquet program, and fucking brick wall hit me out of nowhere. I get diagnosed with, I was lucky in a sense that the kind of chemo that I had to do didn't beat my ass. I was really unlucky in a sense that the kind of chemo I had to do was just a shit ton of fucking chemo. It was my full-time job. Most people do 5 or 6 or 8 rounds of chemo and then they're done. I did 125 rounds of chemo.
Jesus Christ.
I did it every day, 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, 5 days a week for 9 straight months.
Wow.
So I would do it for 4 weeks, Monday through Friday, 3 hours of chemo. And then I would take Saturday and Sunday off, and then I would do it Monday through Friday. And during this process, it would be chemo 5 days a week, EKGs 2 days a week, labs 2 days a week, a doctor's appointment 1 day a week. And then I would do that 4 weeks, boom, 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 boom. I would reach the point where I couldn't have any more chemo, so that I would have to take 4 weeks off so my body could reset. And then I would have to start the cycle over again. So 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off. 4 weeks on and 4 weeks off is one cycle. I did 8 cycles.
Jesus.
During that cycle, I also had to take an oral chemo where it was 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So every other month, I had 2 weeks where I didn't have any oral chemo or any IV chemo at all during this whole process. Every other month, I got 2 weeks where I had no medicine. I had IVs or ports or a PICC line or some combination of the 3 for 18 consecutive months. From June of 2021 until November of 2022, I either had IV, a PICC line, or a port in my body every day for that entire period of time. The good news is I went into remission. Everything was good. I am still in remission now for my cancer. After that, I had to be in remission for 5 years. And if I test clean for 5 consecutive years, then I'm what they considered to be cured. I was tested clean in 2020, the end of 2021. So call it the beginning of 2022. This will be my 3rd year. So I've got 2 years left. In 2020, it'll be, it's October 25th of 2026. I will be considered cured.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to do it, so we're not worried about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. But that's the long story short, too late. But that was the kind of the journey of how I got here. There's a lot more to it than that, but that was the long-winded version of it. Dad died, moved to open the restaurant, got sick, moved back to Nashville.
But before I segue into the next thing, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's a hard story to digest, I'm sure. And again, you're a lot stronger than I give you credit for sometimes. So to a lighthearted subject, what is with the typewriter in the background?
My typewriter.
Yeah.
That's a 1976 Olivetti Lettera 26. Lettera 25, rather.
No idea what that means.
It's an old school, like, machinery weighted typewriter. Like ding, ding. Okay, there's a reason why I have one. Okay. When I graduated and I got my journalism degree, I never said I would use it, right? That's was part of the story. Now, when I got sick, that leads me to the podcasting stuff, right? It's a great segue. That typewriter, perfect segue to this. Allison and I started Botch Bots and Chair Shots together. We were originally going to be like a Mystery Science Theater style wrestling podcast. We were going to get drunk and stoned and like watch wrestling and do like B-roll like commentary over top of it and shit. Just me and her and my buddy Bobby like hanging out, having fun, doing shit like that. It eventually evolved into me and him discussing different periods of wrestling or discussing different topics and titles to where it is today. During that process, Allison and I have evolved from being a single show to being a website, to me writing for that website, to us being a podcast network, to us eventually merging with you guys and becoming 2 channels. Like everything that we've done, like she and I have kind of been doing this for over the last 4 years. And during that time, I've started getting really serious about my writing. I was always a big fan of Anthony Bourdain. I was always a big fan of Hunter Thompson. Hunter Thompson influenced Bourdain. Bourdain influenced me. Kind of like the chain of how that happened. I've always been on the hunt for a red Remington typewriter. That's what Hunter Thompson used. That's what Johnny Depp carried around in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Like that was the typewriter for sports writers and writers in the 60s and the 70s. And yes, the same Remington that makes the pew-pews. They make the typewriter. So for me, I started, learning about mechanical typewriters and what they could do and the kind of the history of the art as they were as a journalist, because I hadn't used my journalism degree, but it was still there. I went to school for it. I learned how to interview people and how to write for mass media and stuff like that. So as I got sick and then we started the podcast and then I started to do it because I figured out I was at least okay enough and didn't suck so bad that people decided to pay me for it, which was fucking unheard of. That I started to get paid to write and talk about wrestling. And I was like, Jesus Christ, this is a weird life. The more serious I got about it, the more serious I got about writing and not just wrestling. I've currently got a couple projects that I'm working on. I'm writing a short film. It's about 30 minutes. I'm about 22 pages into it. So I'm about 66% of the way done with my first draft of my script. I have gotten into editing and producing pro wrestling. I do a weekly indie show where I produce and shoot and do camera work for them once a month for an indie show, which is a lot of fun. So I've started putting my hand into the mass media and the journalism side of the wrestling world. And I wanted to have a little bit of that old school. I wanted to pay a little bit of homage to the guys who came before me and learned the art before me and pay a little bit of tribute to the writers that wrote before me. Hunter Thompson always said when he was writing, especially in college, he would sit at his typewriter and he would type out The Great Gatsby. F. Scott Fitzgerald is one of those writers. Great Gatsby is one of my favorite books in history. And when I was thinking about it, I was like, when you're a podcaster, you listen to other podcasters. When you're a TV or you're an actor, you watch other actors to learn your art. I was like, how would a writer imitate other writers? And then I heard this interview and I heard Hunter S. Thompson talk about sitting in his dorm room and he would put The Great Gatsby in front of him like he was reading music, and he would sit at his typewriter and he would type the words of The Great Gatsby out onto the page. And he was like, I would listen to the music that F. Scott Fitzgerald would type on his typewriter. And immediately, being me, the OCD douche fucking asshole that I am, I was like, God damn, I need a fucking typewriter. So like I immediately started looking for typewriters, and I started engrossing myself with the art of being a writer. And I started learning about it in different styles and the people who did it. And I went down Charles Bukowski and I just started learning about these writers, and they all used weighted typewriters. So I had to have one. So I got one. I learned how to put it together. I learned how to take it apart, put the ribbons on it. I've got paper for it, like the whole nine. You can see my fucking shitty handprints from where I didn't know what I was doing when I was first working on it because I had never owned one. But I know how to work it. I can take my fucker completely apart now and put it back together. It works 100% just like the day it got. All of my, because I watched videos and I learned how to take care of it. And I'm going to get another one. And eventually I'll get my Remington. But I have it because it's the same reason I have a fountain pen. You know what I mean? Like an old school fucking fountain pen, like dipping the ink and fountain pen.
Just
It's an
inspiration.
art. Exactly. It's an
It's a
art.
muse,
Writing,
right? It's a muse.
yeah. Writing is an art. And that's the way I looked at it. And every art, be it cooking or be it wrestling or be it writing, every art I've ever done, I've hyper focused on it.
Fair enough. Looking at the background, right? We have the menu up there, which obviously ties to your chef. We have the typewriter, which you're writing. I see I believe that's a switch behind you. What is your what is your gaming intake like usually? Is that something that just helps you escape? Like where's your mind? Like you said, you're a nerd. So do you dive into the gaming, or is gaming just a release from everything else?
Gaming is 100% a release. When I sit down to play a game, it's to disassociate from the world. Again, my spicy brain and the hyper focus in reality. I'm a diagnosed insomniac, so I don't sleep very well. I just had that conversation earlier today with one of the guys we work with now. He was like, "How much do you actually sleep, Will?" And I was like, "Maybe on a good day, like 6 hours." And he was like, "If that's a good day, what's a normal day like?" And I was like, sometimes as little as 3 or 4 hours a night. It just depends. You know what I mean? Like I toss and turn, I'm up and down a lot. Like sometimes I don't even know.
Mm.
So for me, it was always like I just had to find that balance with it all. And I lost my train of thought. What was your original question? Why was I talking about my
Gaming.
sleep? My gaming.
Hmm.
And gaming is that release. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
no, I
I
understand.
don't I've always been a workaholic and I've always had 1,001 focuses. And gaming is that release. I play a lot of Minecraft. I play a whole lot of Fortnite, probably way more Fortnite than a 39-year-old man should admit. I
Y'all up
just
with Fortnite.
Dude, we've been playing a shit ton of Fortnite. We got Scowls playing Fortnite now. Mike's playing Fortnite.
Y'all still haven't got me on that train, so I'm okay right now. I'm still safe.
Dad Hat just downloaded it on his Switch. Like we've got a train of people playing Fortnite.
Yeah, I'm still
And
safe.
Rivet City Radio, it's obviously like right there, the bottle caps. Allison and I both took a big influence of the formation of Rivet City Radio before Off the Top came on. And we merged with you guys. It was like it was a catch-all in the Fallout universe. When you watch the scroll at the beginning, all of it's that 50s vibes, just like what you get in Fallout. And that was kind of that first point for us in college when we were young. Because again, she and I have been in each other's lives for 20 years. When we were young and in college, she and I played games together. We played Call of Duty together. We lived in our dorm. When she got her first Xbox, like I helped her set it up. You know what I mean? When I got a 120 gig hard drive, she got my 60 gig hard drive. Like she's always been right there with me. And we were playing tons of games all the way through. And Fallout 3 was that game. It was that anchor point for us because we both got it. We both spent tons and tons of time in it. And then throughout time, Fallout 4, Fallout 3, Fallout 4, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 76, like all the different universes. When we started putting our podcast network together in the very original forms last January, Rivet City Radio inside the Fallout, or Rivet City inside the Fallout universe, rather, was a catch-all. It was a USS like warship, like a aircraft carrier that had been converted into a commune. So it was full. It had a radio station and a fucking restaurant and places for people to sleep and a doctor's office and a market. Like it was a catch-all. And that's what we wanted Rivet City Radio to be. Was
Not
a
to
catch-all.
interrupt, but like the five things you just described were literally your life the last 4 years.
Yeah. And that was kind of the point. Rivet City Radio was a catch-all for everything. We wanted it to be a pirate radio station for content creators and free thinkers. And we wrote that in our mission statement. You know what I mean? It was a way for us to go, okay, I want to talk about wrestling, but I might want to talk about food sometimes, or I might want to talk about nerd shit. I might want to talk about horror movies, like now we've got guys that talk about football on Sundays, and we've got a show every night of the week for wrestling and botch spots on Sundays and FNR on Fridays, spread out across 2 networks, 7 nights a week. Like it's all of it. So again, tying it all back is like that all stemmed from our love for gaming. from Fallout 3, from Rivet City, becoming Rivet City Radio. Like it all kinds of like ties together.
Hell yeah. So I think I've asked this question before, but I'm sure there's people that are dying to know. The Botch Spots and Chair Shots name, where does it come from and why is it a thing?
I wanted a name that when I first started the first podcast, like the conversation I had was I had to pick a name that nobody else used. I didn't want to use Squared Circle. I didn't want to use something weird. And again, Botch Spots and Chair Shots was supposed to be something totally different than what it is now. Okay. Botch Spots and Chair Shots was originally supposed to be a drunk and stoned history lesson. Like we were going to be watching old wrestling, talking about it, having fun. Botch Spots, like we're wasted, just fucking cutting up. Like there's going to be lots of flubs and lots of flounders and shit. And then the Chair Shots is obviously because we're going to be watching wrestling. You know what I mean? Like that was the original concept of the name. Was it was going to be two drunken buffoons like fumbling through a wrestling match, like so Botch Spots and Chair Shots. Like it was a clever play on words. But then again, we didn't become a Mystery Science Theater 3000 style podcast. Now we're a news and review show. And, you know, like there's still a little bit of 420 mixed in, but like the original concept 4 years ago versus where we're at today is nothing like it was supposed to be.
That is more than fair. I don't have many segments left with you, but my next question, because I know how I felt, we're going to rewind a year because we just celebrated our 1 year as a collective. Take me through the 2 weeks leading up to mine and your conversation that led to now what is now Rivet City Radio, Off the Top, Botch Spots, Chair Shots as a collective. How did you feel coming in with everything?
Nobody's ever asked me this question. And to be completely honest, I think like when I tell you the answer to it, you're going to be like, wow, I would have thought it would have been the opposite. Like, honestly, when I finished the story. So leading up to January of 2023, so it was last year, we had been for all of podcast was 2021 when we founded. All of 2021 was me being sick and us running on our own independently. Okay. 2022, we joined with a podcast network called Smacked Raw. That's our boy Kyle Tyson and our boy RN. I think you've met them. I know you've met them because they've watched some pay-per-views with us.
Yeah, I believe I have.
Kyle brought us on because Kyle did a live show and a video podcast. We were interested in doing video podcasts, but we weren't too keen on going live. Kyle brought us onto his network, and in a year time, trained us on how to produce a live show, how to put it together, how to run OBS, how to set up a Twitch, how to run a podcast network. And we did 2022 was with Kyle. If you go back on Smacked Raw, you'll still see Botch Spots and Chair Shots on his shit. 2023 in January, we left Kyle and we started. And I said right then, we're going to start Rivet City Radio and it'll be a landing spot for all of my shit. You know what I mean? And her shit and like a few other friends, but really it was going to be like a thing. I was steadfast. I was like, I don't know if I ever want to be in a podcast network again. Leading up, to be completely honest, January to June, when you talked to me, I was the one that was like, I don't know if I ever want to do a network again. I don't think I want to do it. You know what I mean? Because after a year of working with other people, and Smacked Raw wasn't as big as Rivet City Radio is. Now, I'm not casting any shade at them, but it was 3 shows at our biggest, and it was 4 hosts. And at our biggest, we had like 15 hosts and like 12 shows or something ridiculous. You know what I mean? Before some of the, you know, the low-hanging fruit fell off. But I was like, hard. I was like, I don't think I want to do a network. And then leading up to you and I's conversation, you and I had started talking some, and I had started working with Cam some. Me and Bo had started working together. He had joined the show not too much. He had joined the show in January, so he had only been with us for 4 or 5 months at that point. Like everything was still fresh. Bo and I rekindled and worked with Self Bet, and I kind of, because I had been burned a few times too, mind you. This isn't the time or the place. You know, Asian endangered species and you know, guys
Parasites.
with, yeah, you know, like big facial hair dudes that aren't me, you, or Bo. Like there was some shit that went down, and I was kind of jaded with podcast networks, and I was just like, I don't want to deal with that. You and Bo changed my opinion on that. Like, y'all made me go, okay, if we have the right people in the right places doing the right things, this can be fun again. You and Scowls came on, and when I met you and Scowls showed me that it was like that little bit more that I needed. You know what I mean? Like there are good people out there. And now a year later, you and Scowls and Bo are my 3 closest friends. Like there's not very many people on the planet that I talk to guaranteed every day, but I know guaranteed every day I'm going to talk to you, Scowls, Bo, and Al. You know what I mean? Like, so to put it in perspective, January of 2023, if you would have said in August of 2024, not only will you be co-running a podcast network with a group of people, but those people will also be your best friends, I would have said you were batshit fucking crazy. Because leaving Smacked Raw, I wanted to be on our own. I wanted to go back being independent. Like from January till around that June time, I didn't think I wanted to be in a network again. And then the more I got to know you, and the more I got to know Cam, and the more I got to know Scowls, and then when we actually started the merger process, I was like, this is the right call. By the time we started the merger, I was 100% on board. You know what I mean? Like, because it was from January until that June point, that 5 months, it was like January, no, February, no, March, no, May, June. Okay, I like these guys. We could do it. Middle of June. Okay. Shadow wants to merge. I think I'm here for it. July, like, okay, let's do it. August, ground running. We're off to the races. And a year later, it's like, again, closest friends.
I mean, I feel the same way. Like, obviously, with Off the Top, we started in 21, just as long as probably side by side, pretty much the same time you guys did.
You guys were what, February of 21?
Somewhere in there. It might have been, I think, just after Rumble. Like
we were April, right before WrestleMania of that year. Our first episode dropped the week before WrestleMania of 2021.
And like when me and Scowls started it, you know, it was 3 of us. There was me, Scowls, and his name is Jared. You know, he eventually fell off, and me and Scowls kept going. And then there was a hiatus point that we both hit, and then we came back. And you know, I told Scowls at the beginning of 2023, or it might have been end of 2022. I was like, the next year is going to be big. I don't care what it takes. We're making it big. You know, we're not overly big. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to oversell something that's not there. But we worked our way. I met you. I met Al. I met Bo. I met all these people. And I came on one of your shows. I think it was a trivia night thing. And like within 48 hours after that, I'm like, I got to work with this guy.
It was a lot of fun. Y'all made it fun again. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but that was the biggest thing is I wasn't having fun with Kyle, but it was like, it felt like work. It doesn't feel like work with you guys. That's what I like about it.
There's no point at all where I feel, I got to do a show.
But this is the key factor here. This is what I'm going to say. And I'm sorry to keep cutting you off. This is your show.
It is your interview.
the key important thing to remember about Rivet City Radio and Off the Top is we started in July of last year, and now a year later, we're not making money. None of us are paying our bills by podcasting. But you know what we don't do? We don't pay out of pocket to stream 7 nights a week. You know what I mean? Like, we don't pay out of pocket for the Table Spot and for the Boom and for FNR and Botch Spots and Share Shots and Nerdy News and Sorry for the Interruption and fucking Trivia and all the other shows we do on our network. Like, none of that gets paid for out of pocket now. And I feel like, to me, that's a fucking win in my book. The fact that none of us have to pay out of pocket for Rivet City Radio and Off the Top to run now is a win. Like, there's not very many podcasts that can say that. You know what I mean? No. Like, it doesn't cost us out of pocket to operate, and that's a win in my book.
I mean, you know, as you know, you've met a lot of people doing this. Mm-hmm. I'm the same. I'm now meeting people. Like I said, you're definitely my mentor when it comes to interviews, right? I've met an indie company now that I'm working almost close as hell with, to the point where I'm now going to one of their shows on thanks to them, because they want me out there.
And that's the most important thing. I cannot say it enough that if you're a podcaster and you want to get involved with an independent wrestling company, show up and do the fucking work. Do what Shadow did. Show up, shake their hands, be appreciative, help them put a ring together if you're there that early. Like, do the work without being asked, and that'll be all the respect that'll earn you all the respect you need in the wrestling business. RESPCT. Find out what it means to me. Or whatever the fuck Michael Scott said.
I thought it was Michael Jordan, but anyway.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Michael Scott, Wayne Gretzky.
Hey, a hockey reference. I'll take it. Or as you like to call it, Quidditch.
Nice.
Yeah. We're not doing this. Before I wrap up, the tinfoil hat will. Where does that come from? I understand, and what I mean by that is everybody understands what a tinfoil hat person is, or they should. Where does that come from? Like, is that just your curiosity that piques your OCD? Like, what is it that makes you? I got to deep dive this. I got to find a conspiracy to it.
Ooh, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I've wanted to do a show for a long time. I'll pull the curtain all the way back here. I've been interested in conspiracy theories as long as I can remember. I had a fascination. My mom was young. She had me and both my sisters before her 21st birthday. So I was old enough to remember my mom going to college. She was a paralegal. So my mom was studying, serial killers and stuff while I was like 6 and 7 and 8 years old. So it was one of those weird, like, I learned about Charles Manson when normal kids were learning about, Barney and shit, right? Like, I was one of those weird kids. So I've always kind of been in the macabre side of life. Like, let's just say that, right? Okay. So I've always thought that conspiracy theories intrigued me because it was like that whole concept of Big Brother, George Orwell and Brave New World, Aldous Huxley and Brave New World, George Orwell in 1984, like that kind of stuff. So as I got older and started reading those books, I started to read an Animal Farm and, Ayn Rand and stuff that had deeper meaning, but talked about stuff that was happening in the real world. Then, unfortunately, because I'm an older millennial and I've lived through a fucking more life-changing trauma than any human being ever needs to, 9/11 happened. And to be completely honest, 9/11 changed how I looked at the world, because that was the first conspiracy theory that I watched in real time. And I was like, and again, you'll have to forgive me, Scows. You can cut this part out if you don't want to. Even as a kid at 16 years old, I was like, there's no way that 5 dudes that couldn't pass their flight test to get their pilot's license could maneuver 747s in like fighter jet patterns to do what they did that day. I saw straight through the bullshit. So that kind of opened a door for me, and I started going down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theries. And now
Pandora's box.
Yeah, it's Pandora's box for the shit that's happened in this country and everything that's gone. And now, I'll tell you, I frequent some online forums, some Reddits, as it were, and a few things and stuff like that. I stay away from like 4chan and stuff because it gets too fucking like predatory for me. It is, but I don't fuck with 4chan anymore for that reason. It's about as weird as Grindr is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, people go to those websites for one thing, and that's not. I'm not yucking any yums. It's just not my cup of tea. You know what I'm saying?
I get it.
So I'll stick with my Reddit for my conspiracy theories. But I'm on a few boards, and it's like people like me, open-minded people that go, what if the world isn't the way they say it is? And I think that's the biggest way to look at conspiracy theories. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about looking at the world through a different pair of lenses than you ever looked at it in, to go, okay, because for me, the most fascinating way to look at it is the way history is taught around the world. And this will be my last one, and then I'll cut it off for you. It's like, look at how World War II is taught throughout the world, how the U.S. teaches it versus how Canada teaches it versus how the UK teaches it versus how Germany teaches it. It's 4 very different impressions on how that war happened.
Mm-hmm.
Now go see how Japan teaches it. That's my point.
I got some homework to do. I like this.
You know what I mean? Like, think about, this is world history that people were here to live through, and you will have 4 or 5 different perspectives on what happened during that war based on which country wrote it. And then I said, well, if they'll do something like that with something as big as a world war, what would they manipulate and change that they wouldn't want us to know about?
Well, if I can cut you off for a second.
No, for sure,
Canadian
please.
history books, we aren't taught a lot of our own heritage in a lot of our own countries beginning because, again, trigger warning, there's a lot of genocide that happened to the native people. And they don't want us to learn that in school. We learn more about American history in our schools than probably you guys do. Like stupid mind-numbing shit that you don't need to know.
And just like, but also like that, we spend so much time learning about the 13 colonies and why the fuck we annexed ourselves from England that we don't spend any time learning about the indigenous people that lived in this country before we did. We're not learning about any of the history of the land. We're learning about the history of the countries that took over the land from the indigenous people. Like, we aren't learning American history. We're learning a modified British, French, and German history of what they teach us from when they got here in the 1300s. We're not learning American history. And I know that's a very like broad stroke way to look at it, but it's the honest truth, man. There were indigenous people living here for hundreds and thousands of years before Christopher Columbus sailed that ocean blue. You know what I mean? Like, we've never been taught the history of those people. We get taught the whitewashed British Empire version of that history.
The literal sense of that, the whitewashed.
No, and I'm saying that very literally. And then you look at what you were just saying about Canada. You guys learn more American history than Canadian history, and American history is just whitewashed British and German and French history. So you see the point here. We've reached a point starting in the 1700s where indigenous history stopped being a thing and it was all about the people in control. That's why I wear a tinfoil hat.
I love it. Well,
this has been the fucking weirdest conversation I'm sure you've ever had in one of your interviews, and I apologize for that.
This is why I do this stuff, though, right? And again, it's awesome to sit down and different views of life and stuff like that. It's amazing. I am now going to say my piece, and then I'm going to let you promote the shit out of yourself, and then we're going to go and have a beer somewhere offline because we're cool like that. So, that being said, this has been an episode of Spotlight with Shadow. This is an episode that will have some trigger warnings. I'm sure you've already experienced. I hope you enjoyed the conversation of Will, pulling the curtain back just a little bit to learn who he is. Next week is the season finale. It's a mystery guest. Make sure you tune in, find out what's happening. With that being said, Will, take it away with everything you need to plug, sir.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you for doing this. In the 120 interviews I've done in my professional career, this is only the second time anybody's ever interviewed me. So thank you for that. It's always fun to tell your story, especially to people who want to hear it. And I feel like I have a good story to tell, and that's not me being arrogant. It's a cool fucking story.
I listen to every bit of it.
If you're interested in my shenanigans elsewhere, I am the Will Gray. I'm the host and lead writer of Botch Bots and Chair Shots. If you check my link tree at that name, you'll find everything I do for Rivet City Radio, Off the Top Media, World Championship Wreckage, and my professional writing profile for Last Word on Sports and The Sportster. It's where you'll find all my dirt sheet shit.
Perfect. That being said, this has been Spotlight with Shadow.